Good morning, and how is everybody doing? I'm so excited to do this video today. Forgive me for the lack of editing and the black camera that you see before you. Um, I didn't really feel like doing a bunch of editing. I'm too lazy right now, and also my face looked like a mess because I just got up not too long ago. So I'm essentially just shooting from the hip. So this video may sound like quite of a mess, but if it does, I extend my sincerest apologies, and you can take that for what it's worth. But I just basically wanted to talk a little bit about this whole impeachment thing and give my take on it and try to outline some threads on what I really think is going on here. Um, so this video is going to be entitled Impeachment, Political and Spiritual Implications. And the way I can lay it out is basically like this. This whole impeachment thing, because the Democrats, obviously, they control the House, if you guys don't know. Um, Depending on if some of you guys follow politics or not, the Democrats control the House right now, and they voted to impeach Trump last night. And for the most part, it was dang near universal across the board for the Democrats, except for three. There were two who voted no, and Tulsi Gabbard, she voted present. So maybe that's a little something you can factor into this whole thing. But um, I just wanted to just make one basic point, and it's essentially the fact that this whole thing isn't about evidence. It never has been about evidence, and whatever they try to come up with from henceforth will never be about evidence. And here's what I mean. If you look at what happened before this, if you look at the whole alleged Russia collusion thing, and you look at the Mueller report, which was basically a bust, you know what? It really ain't no basically. Excuse me. It really ain't no basically about it. It was a bust. It was a total fail. It was almost in terms of like political implications for the Democrats. It was basically political suicide for them. They really had no evidence whatsoever. Robert Mueller himself, when he testified, was a total embarrassment. Even a lot of the Democrats on the mainstream media networks were saying how much of an embarrassment Robert Mueller was. I mean, he was supposed to be the guy that had the goods on Trump. He was going to drop the curtain on Trump's presidency, because all the media networks were reporting that the walls were closing in, and basically Trump's presidency was inevitably finished, and that just blew up in his face, and it was exposed for the total lack of facts and the total lack of substance that it was. And they wasted tens of millions of dollars and 2.5 to 3 years of just nonsense on trying to pin Trump and or the Trump campaign to alleged Russia collusion. Here's my thing about this whole nonsense with which was had led up to this whole thing about impeachment. The thing is, the current thing about this impeachment has been centered around a narrative that shifted from the Russia scheme to Ukraine and President Zelensky, because they was trying to say there was a quid pro quo, that there was corruption involved in aid to Ukraine, so on and so forth. I'm not gonna break down the whole ins and outs of the whole thing. You guys can research that on your own time if you don't really know about it. But basically, they're trying to say that there was corruption involved in the aid to Ukraine, and that there was a quid pro quo. You know, Trump did all these corrupt things. You know, they're trying to lay out a number of different things. They keep moving the goalposts. They'll say things like, well, it was obstruction of justice, or it was bribery, or it was abuse of power. You know, every time one angle doesn't work, they move it to something else. And the reason why they're doing this is because it's not about facts. It's not about evidence. It's just about political power. That's it. I know that seems kind of obvious, but it has to be pointed out for this very reason, because when you talk about political power, you actually have to juxtapose that with the spiritual warfare behind the political power. So us Christians know that the things that we see that go on in this world cannot be removed from the spiritual warfare. And seeing as this whole thing is not about evidence, and it's never been about evidence, that just means one thing. It simply means that there's a spiritual warfare going on behind and driving this political warfare. And Democrats have established one thing and one thing only, is that they oppose anything that goes against their worldview, anything that goes against their philosophical vision of what the world ought to be like. And Trump is a big, obviously, a big wall to what they believe. He's essentially the black hole that is sucking in, their whole attempt to just, to just change this country, change the very fabric of this country from the ground up. And a lot of the foundations that's woven into how this country was built is based on Christian values. And you can debate whether Trump is a Christian or not. I personally don't know. I'm inclined to say that he's not. I do believe he cares about the country, but as far as him being saved or things like that, I'm kind of iffy to say that he is. But there's no question he cares about the country. But having said that, I do believe that he wants to defend Christianity in the sense that even though he may not be a Christian himself, if he isn't a Christian, that's an asterisk right there. I'm not saying one way or another, but let's just say that he's not a Christian. I do believe that he wholeheartedly believes in the right to religious liberty for Christians, because there is an assault on Christian liberty in this country as we speak. And I do believe very much he thinks Christian liberty, at the very least, not just merely religious liberty, but for Christians to live and flourish in this country, I do believe that he believes that that's very, very essential to the prosperity of this country. And he stands in the way of that because a lot of Democrats completely believe otherwise. He may try to say, well, there's Christians who are Democrats, blah, 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 blah. Don't even try to sell me with that argument, because you ain't going to get anywhere. But he stands in the way to certain essential philosophical foundations that they believe. And that's all this is about. The ultimate thing here is there's a spiritual warfare driving this political warfare. And you have to understand that they will stop at absolutely nothing to see that worldview come to fruition, even if it means telling outright lies and operating on things which have no basis in fact whatsoever. I mean, if you see, you gotta understand what the political divide is in this country. Nobody's minds have really been significantly changed on this whole thing. People who supported Trump still support Trump, and people who were against him are still against him. But it's quite telling that you even having Democrats, certain Democrats I should say, I'm not going to say it's a wide-scale Democrats, but you've had, I think, a few notable Democrats, or at least people who don't support Trump whatsoever, I can't remember the gentleman's name, but I believe he's some sort of legal scholar or professor or something like that. He had testified, or did he testify? Or just give his commentary, or just give his remarks on the impeachment thing. Well, he gave his remarks on the impeachment thing. He just said that this is not how you impeach a president. Okay, so he was not a Trump supporter whatsoever, and he just thought this whole thing was just wrong. The bottom line is this: if the Democrats would have had the evidence to remove Trump and they had the facts, it wouldn't have even gotten to this whole Ukraine nonsense. It wouldn't have even gotten to this point. They would have removed them around the Russia collusion thing. And I dare to say they would have removed them even before that. Because the ringleader behind both of these huge attempts to remove Trump, when you talk about the whole Russia collusion thing, and then you move to the Ukraine thing, which is basically Russia 2.0, Adam Schiff was saying at the time, he's the ringleader behind this whole thing. Adam Schiff was saying at the time that he had all this powerful evidence, all this power, indisputable evidence that Trump did all these terrible things and was involved in Russia collusion and all this other crap. He was on Tucker Carlson's show and he just embarrassed himself just totally on that show. He said that he had all this powerful evidence that had been saying it for the longest time, and he just never showed it. For some reason, he had all the evidence and never showed it, never presented it. And if you want even more, proof that it's not about the facts, you could fast forward it till current events. The same guy, Adam Schiff, totally made up something that Trump never said at all. Talking about, Trump said, I want you to get dirt on my political opponents. I want you to dig up dirt on my political opponents. And if you look at the transcript that Schiff was reading from, that was never in there. He just outright lied about something that Trump never said. And then when he was called out on it, he tried to backpedal and say, "Oh, the whole thing, it was just an exaggeration." What word am I looking for? I can't think of the word, but he was just trying to say that the whole thing was an exaggeration. It was just simply putting an exaggerated, like, little spin on what Trump was actually doing. Hyperbole, that's the word I'm looking for. He tried to backpedal and then say it was hyperbole, where any basic person who can put two brain cells together can see that he was full of crap. And, I don't want to, get into like the basic puns that's been put forth towards him. But I mean, they were saying that he's full of, his last name. His last name is Adam Schiff. You guys could put that together. But he just totally just made up just this bogus thing. And this man just embarrassed himself time and time again. And he's exposed himself for what he is. He everything he's tried to say about Trump is basically what he's guilty of himself. And it's a real shame that the Democrats have not really called this man to the carpet and called this man's integrity into question. Or if they have, there seems to be no significant evidence to, in my opinion, that they really have, if they have. And you can't really question the guy because I think he has some sort of immunity. I don't know how any of that stuff works, but he could just basically just sit here and do almost what he wants. I mean, this whole impeachment thing was partisan from the start. It was totally unlike what was going on during Clinton's time, which it was universally agreed that Clinton had involved himself in sexual misconduct while in office. And this was totally unlike that whatsoever, because there is um, no bipartisan agreement on both sides whatsoever. And it's only about removing Trump. Orange man bad this, orange man bad that. It's about the political narrative. That's all it's about. But the whole spiritual warfare behind this, what's driving it, because these people are about radically transforming this country on a moral level, which you could talk about things like trying to transform the traditional family, getting rid of gun rights, because that's what they want to do. They want to get rid of gun rights. They want to advance abortion on demand. And I do believe they eventually want to advance it to unlimited abortion on demand. Because here's the thing, they believe in free health care for everyone, and they want to include abortion in that definition of health care. So they want to try to say that if abortion is health care, then, and if health care is free, you put two and two together, then abortion becomes free. But this is all political narrative that they want to push, and the spiritual warfare is, it's about being anti-Christian, anti-God. Everything you see in politics right now is an all-out war on Christianity. Once you break it down to its root terms, to its root causes, to its root origins, you'll find out that it's an attempt to attack Christianity. Because Christianity, on the spiritual level, Christianity is the single most powerful thing that's standing in the way of Democrat rule. You take out Christianity, the Democrats basically were in perpetuity. People want to put all these political angles and these, and I'm not saying these are without merit. There may be merit to a lot of these things. They say they want to look at things like demographics and say that if the demographics shift, then the country radically shifts. When you look at the whole thing going on with the border crisis and stuff, they're trying to say that if more illegals are allowed to come in and more illegals are getting welfare, because that's the argument that's being made by certain people who's been called like the groypers. If you look at people like not Alan, it's Nick Fuentes, not Alan Fuentes, Nick Fuentes. And I'm not saying I agree with everything they say. There's a whole lot of stuff I vehemently disagree with, but I do think they make valid points when they talk about demographic shifts. But that's on, I guess, a mathematical level. I guess you have more people coming in that generally get to welfare benefits, people who are low-skilled workers and things like that, and people who typically tend to vote Democrat, because all the statistics seem to say that when you have these low-skilled workers coming in, most of them tend to vote Democrat. And of course, if they're voting Democrat, that radically changes the direction of the country and where people vote and where the country moves. But I think, not that those points don't have any merit, but I think the real issue is the spiritual movement. The spiritual movement is what's the real issue in my view. And if people were more aware or more privy to the things that are off, I don't want to say often, because I don't want to make Christianity to look like it's some sort of buffet to treat you real good if you come in and do this and that. But what Christianity has. Um, Christianity talks about self-responsibility. It talks about self-accountability. It talks about loving your neighbor, helping your neighbor. All these things that are um, generally opposed by the Democratic Party and their philosophical narrative. They like to package some of these things as helping your neighbor and this and that, was actually stealing from your neighbor. But self-responsibility, self-accountability, that you have the power, of course, in Christ, but you have the power to affect things in your life through Him moving in you. You don't have to rely on the government. You don't have to rely on your fellow man. You rely on Him and Him alone first. And He engineers the rest of what happens in your life. You lay your trust and your foundations in Him, and He engineers everything else. But they believe in taking that away and saying, we're Big Daddy, we're God. You need to count on us. And once you remove the Christian element from that fabric, you set into motion an overwhelming, virtually insurmountable, an insurmountable foundation, which leads to a society, which leads to permanent Democrat rule. So the spiritual foundations are what's really moving all this. But at this point, I don't want to go on too much of a tangent. I'm just going to end the video here and just tell me what you guys think. If you think I'm wrong, let me know. If you agree, again, let me know. Just put how you feel in the comments and just be respectful to one another. So thank you guys for watching this, and I'll see y'all next time. Take care. God bless. Peace.